The hover car flew through the bright lights of New Seoul's government district. Kira pressed her face to the window, watching the tall buildings pass below. She had never been this high off the ground before. The streets where she lived looked very different from up here. Cleaner. Safer. Daeho watched her reaction and felt a strange tightness in his chest. When had he last seen such simple wonder? His own daughter was about this girl's age, safe on Earth with her mother. She took hover car rides for granted. She had never known hunger or fear or the need to sleep in alleys. "Where are we going?" Kira asked quietly. "My residence," Daeho replied. "I have a doctor friend who can look at that infection." Kira pulled her sleeve down further. "I cannot pay for a doctor." "You do not need to pay. She owes me favors." The hover car landed on the roof of a tall building in the diplomatic quarter. Kira had never seen anything so grand. The building was covered in glass and metal that reflected the city lights like a jewel. Gardens grew on every level, fed by automated systems that brought water and nutrients to plants from a dozen different worlds. "This is where you live?" she asked in amazement. "While I am stationed here, yes," Daeho said. "It belongs to the Earth Colonial Alliance. Many ambassadors have lived here before me." They took an elevator down to Daeho's floor. The hallways were wide and clean, decorated with art from human colonies across the galaxy. Kira tried not to touch anything. Everything looked expensive and breakable. Daeho's apartment was larger than the shipping container where Kira sometimes slept. It had real windows that showed the city spreading out in all directions. The furniture was soft and comfortable. There were books on shelves, actual paper books, not digital readers. Kira had not seen physical books since her parents died. "Please sit," Daeho said, gesturing to a chair. "I will call Dr. Park." Kira sat carefully on the edge of the chair, ready to run if needed. Old habits were hard to break. Daeho spoke into his communication device. "Hye-jin, I know it is late, but I need a favor. Can you come to my residence? I have someone who needs medical attention." There was a pause, then a woman's voice answered. "What kind of attention? Should I bring equipment?" "Bacterial infection, I think. The patient is Altarian. Young. I will be there in 20 minutes. Try to keep them comfortable." Daeho ended the call and looked at Kira. She was staring at a photograph on his desk. It showed him with a woman and a teenage girl, all of them smiling at a beach somewhere. "Your family?" Kira asked. "Yes. My wife Mi-young and my daughter So-young. They live on Earth while I work here. Do you miss them?" The question was so simple, so direct, that it caught Daeho off guard. In diplomatic circles, people rarely ask such personal things. "Every day," he admitted. Kira nodded. "I miss my parents too. But they are not just far away. They are gone forever." Before Daeho could respond, there was a knock at the door. Dr. Hye-jin Park entered without waiting for an answer. She was a small, energetic woman in her 50s carrying a medical bag that looked like it could treat anything from a headache to major surgery. "So where is my patient?" she asked, then stopped when she saw Kira. "Oh, hello there." Kira tensed, but Dr. Park's voice was gentle. She had the kind of manner that made people trust her quickly. "This is Kira," Daeho said. "She returned my diplomatic bag when I lost it tonight. I noticed she has some injuries that need attention." Dr. Park approached slowly, the way someone might approach a frightened animal. "May I see your arm, Kira?" Kira looked at Daeho, who nodded encouragingly. Slowly, she rolled up her sleeve. Dr. Park's expression grew serious when she saw the infection. Red lines spread from several deep cuts. The wounds were clearly several days old and getting worse. "How did this happen?" Dr. Park asked. "Broken glass," Kira said. "I was looking for food in a trash container. I cut myself on something sharp." Dr. Park opened her medical bag and began pulling out instruments. "This is quite serious. Without treatment, this type of infection can spread to your bloodstream. For Altarians, that can be fatal." Kira's amber eyes widened. "Fatal? Not anymore," Dr. Park said firmly. "We caught it in time. But you need antibiotics, and you need rest, and you need proper food." She began cleaning the wounds with practiced efficiency. Kira winced but did not cry out. She had learned not to show weakness. "You are very brave," Dr. Park said as she worked. "But you do not need to be brave right now. It is safe to let people help you." As Dr. Park treated the infection, she asked gentle questions. How long had Kira been on the streets? Where did she usually sleep? When had she last had a real meal? The answers painted a picture that made both adults increasingly upset. Kira had been surviving on scraps and charity for 2 years. She slept wherever she could find shelter. She had learned to avoid both the human gangs who preyed on aliens and the alien gangs who saw her as competition for resources. "Why do you not go to the refugee center?" Dr. Park asked. Kira's scales shifted color slightly. "I tried, but they said I need papers, identity documents, my parents' death certificates. Everything was lost when our housing complex was demolished after the accident." Deho frowned. "The mining company should have provided those documents." "The mining company said there was no record of my parents ever working for them," Kira replied bitterly. "They said maybe my parents worked for someone else, or maybe I was confused about who they were. But you remember them clearly." "Altarians do not forget," Kira said simply. "We remember everything. Every face, every conversation, every moment. It is how we are made." Dr. Park finished bandaging the wounds and gave Kira an injection of antibiotics. "That should start fighting the infection within hours," she said. "But you need rest and nutrition to fully recover." She turned to Deho. "I need to speak with you privately." They stepped into the kitchen, leaving Kira in the main room. She immediately went to the bookshelf, running her fingers along the spines of volumes written in languages from across human space. "That girl is very sick," Dr. Park said quietly. "Not just the infection. She is severely malnourished. Her immune system is compromised. Without proper care, she might not survive another month on the streets." Deho felt something cold settle in his stomach. "What can we do?" "Short term? Feed her, treat the infection, let her rest. Long term?" Dr. Park shrugged. "She needs a safe place to live. She needs legal status. She needs someone to advocate for her with the refugee services. I could arrange temporary housing through the embassy." "Deho." Dr. Park's voice was serious. "I have been your friend for 15 years. I have seen you make many decisions, good and bad. But I need to ask you something important. Why are you doing this?" Deho was quiet for a moment. Through the doorway he could see Kira carefully examining one of his books, her amber eyes bright with intelligence despite her exhaustion. "She returned my bag," he said finally. "She could have sold everything in it and lived comfortably for months. Instead, she brought it back because her parents taught her it was the right thing to do. When was the last time you met someone who made decisions based purely on what was right, rather than what benefited them?" Dr. Park smiled. "Not in the diplomatic corps, certainly. 3 weeks ago, I sat across from hegemony leaders who lied to my face about their military buildups. Last month, I watched human colonists deny aid to refugee camps because it might affect their trade agreements. Every day I deal with people who have forgotten that sometimes doing the right thing is more important than doing the profitable thing." He gestured toward Kira. "That girl has nothing. No family, no money, no legal status, no future that anyone cares about. And she still chose to do what was right. If we let her die on the streets, what does that say about us?" Dr. Park was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "You are right. But you should know that helping her might be more complicated than you think." "What do you mean?" I ran a quick scan while I was treating her wounds. "Do you know what Altarians are famous for besides their memory? Their honesty, I think. They have trouble lying. That and their ability to learn languages. This girl speaks at least 7 that I could identify from her word choices and accent patterns. Korean, Standard Galactic, Centaurian Trade Tongue, Hegemony High Speech, and 3 others I did not recognize." Deho raised an eyebrow. "She learned all that living on the streets?" "From listening to broadcasts and conversations, apparently. Altarian brains are designed to absorb and process linguistic patterns. In the right environment, they make exceptional translators and cultural interpreters. You think someone might want to exploit that ability?" "I think," Dr. Park said carefully, "that a young Altarian with perfect memory and multilingual skills might be very valuable to certain organizations, including ones that might not have her best interests at heart." As if summoned by their conversation, Deho's communication device chimed. He glanced at the message and frowned. "What is it?" Dr. Park asked. "Captain Lee wants to speak with me. She is on her way up." Captain Boram Lee was the embassy's security chief. She did not make social calls, especially not at midnight. A few minutes later, Captain Lee arrived. She was a compact woman with sharp eyes and the bearing of someone who had spent years in military service. She nodded politely to Dr. Park, then focused on Deho. "Ambassador, I need to discuss the alien girl you brought here tonight." The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the Earth Colonial Alliance Embassy. Kira woke slowly on the soft couch where she had slept, confused for a moment about where she was. For 2 years she had woken up on hard surfaces in cold places. This warmth and comfort felt like a dream. Then she remembered. The diplomat. The doctor. The kindness of strangers who had no reason to help her. Daeho was sitting at his desk across the room, speaking quietly into his communication device. His voice was tense and Kira could hear frustration in his tone even though she could not understand all the words. I do not care what their legal papers say, he was saying. That girl is under the protection of this embassy. The hegemony will have to go through proper diplomatic channels. Kira sat up, suddenly alert. The hegemony was looking for her. She had hoped that by leaving Kepler 442b, she had escaped their attention. But the mining companies had long memories and the hegemony did not like loose ends. Daeho finished his call and turned to see her awake. Good morning, Kira. How do you feel? Better, she said honestly. The antibiotics Dr. Park had given her were already working. Her arm hurt less and her fever was gone. But I think I should leave now. Why? Because they are looking for me. The hegemony. I heard you talking. Daeho studied her face. How much do you know about why they want you? Kira was quiet for a long moment. She had spent 2 years avoiding this conversation, hoping that if she stayed invisible long enough, everyone would forget about her. But invisibility was not working anymore. My parents worked for Titan Mining Corporation, she said finally. They dug rare metals out of asteroids. My father was a shift supervisor. He was good at his job. What happened the day they died? There was an accident. A tunnel collapsed. 17 miners were killed, including my parents. Kira's voice was steady, but her amber eyes held old pain. The company said it was unavoidable. Equipment failure. Bad luck. But you do not think it was an accident? I know it was not an accident. Kira's scales shifted color slightly, the way they did when Altarians felt strong emotions. 3 days before the collapse, my father came home angry. He had found safety reports that showed the tunnel supports were failing, he told his supervisor. They told him to keep working anyway. Daeho leaned forward. Do you remember the exact words? I remember everything, Kira said simply. Altarians do not forget. The supervisor's name was Marcus Webb. He said the insurance will cover any problems. Keep the crews working. We have quotas to meet. You heard this conversation? My father recorded it on his personal device. He played it for my mother that night. He was thinking about reporting it to the Colonial Mining Authority. Daeho felt a chill run down his spine. If what Kira was saying was true, then her parents had not died in an accident. They had been murdered for corporate profits. What happened to the recording? It was destroyed when our housing complex was demolished after the accident. The company said they needed to clear the area for safety reasons. They destroyed everything. Personal belongings, documents, evidence. Kira's voice hardened. But they could not destroy my memory. Before Daeho could respond, there was a knock at the door. Captain Lee entered, followed by a tall man in military uniform whom Kira did not recognize. Ambassador, Captain Lee said, this is General Tae-Woon Cho. He flew in from Earth Command this morning. General Cho was an older man with steel-gray hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to being obeyed. His eyes swept the room and settled on Kira with uncomfortable intensity. So this is our witness, he said. This is Kira. Daeho corrected firmly. She is a refugee seeking protection from political persecution. She is a potential intelligence asset, General Cho replied. If she truly has perfect recall of conversations related to hegemony mining operations, she could provide evidence of war crimes. Kira stood up quickly. I am not anyone's asset. I am just trying to survive. General Cho smiled, but it was not a warm expression. Miss Velnathi, you may not realize this, but what you witnessed could justify resuming military action against the hegemony. Titan Mining Corporation is owned by hegemony interests. If they deliberately killed workers to maintain profits, that violates 17 different interstellar treaties. I do not want war, Kira said quietly. What you want is not relevant, General Cho said. What matters is justice for your parents and the other miners who died. Daeho stepped between the general and Kira. General, with respect, this girl has been through enough. She needs time to recover, not pressure to become a weapon in your political games. This is not a game, Ambassador. The hegemony has been pushing the boundaries of acceptable behavior for years. Their military buildup threatens human colonies across 3 sectors. If we can prove they commit war crimes against their own workers, we can justify preemptive action. You want to start a war based on the testimony of a traumatized child? I want to prevent a war by giving the hegemony a reason to back down from their aggressive posture. Kira listened to the 2 men argue about her life as if she were not in the room. It was a familiar feeling. Adults had been making decisions about her future without consulting her since her parents died. "Stop," she said quietly. They kept arguing. "Stop," she said louder. Both men turned to look at her. "I will not be your weapon," she said firmly. "I will not testify to help you start wars. I have seen enough death." General Cho's expression darkened. "You may not have a choice. The Colonial Alliance has legal authority to compel testimony in matters of interstellar security." "Actually," a new voice said from the doorway, "she does have a choice." Everyone turned to see a young woman entering the room. She was about Kira's age, with short black hair and intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She carried a stack of legal documents and moved with quiet confidence. "Who are you?" General Cho demanded. "Yuri Han," the woman replied. "I am the embassy's cultural liaison and translator, and I have been researching Miss Velnathi's legal status." She handed a document to Daeho. "Under Article 12 of the Interstellar Refugee Protection Act, any individual fleeing political persecution has the right to request asylum. They cannot be compelled to provide testimony that might endanger their safety or the safety of others from their home region." General Cho snatched the document and read it quickly. His frown deepened with each line. "This is a technicality," he said. "This is the law," Yuri replied calmly. "Miss Velnathi has formally requested asylum. The Earth Colonial Alliance is legally obligated to process her request fairly, without coercion." Kira stared at the young woman in surprise. "You filed asylum papers for me?" "I filed the initial request," Yuri said. "But the choice is yours. You can withdraw the request if you want to, or you can proceed with the full application process." "What would that mean?" Kira asked. "It means you would be under the protection of human law while your case is reviewed. It also means you cannot be forced to testify against your will, and it means the hegemony cannot simply demand your extradition." General Cho looked furious. "Ambassador, I need to speak with you privately." They stepped into the next room, but Kira could hear their raised voices through the door. The general was angry about legal obstacles. Daeho was defending her right to choose her own path. Yuri approached Kira while the men argued. "Are you all right?" she asked in fluent Altarian. Kira's eyes widened. "Very few humans learn to speak her language. You know my people's tongue?" "I studied xenolinguistics at university," Yuri replied, switching back to Korean. "I specialize in helping refugees navigate human legal systems." "Why are you helping me?" Yuri smiled. "Because everyone deserves to have someone on their side, and because I think there might be a better way to handle this situation than either starting a war or hiding forever." "What do you mean?" "The hegemony wants you silenced because they think you will accuse them of murder. The military wants you to testify because they think it will give them an excuse for war. But what if there was a third option?" Kira tilted her head, listening. "What if you spoke to the hegemony directly?" Yuri suggested. "Not to accuse them, but to offer them a chance to do the right thing voluntarily. You think they would listen?" "I think they might be more afraid of your testimony than anyone realizes. Sometimes when people are afraid, they make bad decisions. But if you approach them without threats, if you gave them a chance to make things right, they might choose to do better rather than fight to hide what they did wrong," Kira finished. Yuri nodded. "It is risky. They might refuse. They might try to silence you anyway. But it would be your choice, not something forced on you by others." The argument in the next room was getting louder. General Cho was demanding that Daeho override the asylum request. Daeho was refusing to violate international law. Kira looked at Yuri. This young woman had appeared at exactly the right moment, with exactly the right knowledge to protect her. It felt too convenient to be coincidence. "Who sent you?" Kira asked. Yuri's cheeks colored slightly. "Ambassador Kim asked me to research your legal options. He thought you deserved to know what rights you had. He asked you to help me. He said that anyone brave enough to return a lost wallet when they were starving deserved someone to fight for them." Kira felt something warm bloom in her chest. After 2 years of being invisible, someone had noticed her. The space station Harmony Point drifted slowly between 2 stars. its gleaming hull reflecting the light of distant suns. Built 50 years ago as a neutral meeting place for diplomatic talks, it had become the most important political venue in known space. Today, it hosted a meeting that could determine the fate of billions. Kira stood at the observation deck, watching ships arrive from across the galaxy. Hegemony vessels, sleek and dark, lined up beside human transports with their bright blue markings. Alien craft from a dozen species waited in neat rows, their crews monitoring the talks that could affect trade routes and military alliances throughout the sector. Nervous? Yuri asked, joining her at the window. Terrified, Kira admitted. But my parents taught me that being brave does not mean you are not scared. It means you do what needs to be done even when you are scared. 3 weeks had passed since that morning in Daeho's office. 3 weeks of preparation, training, and diplomatic negotiations just to arrange this meeting. The hegemony had agreed to face-to-face talks, but their terms had been harsh. If the meeting failed, if Kira's testimony led to accusations of war crimes, then Daeho would be branded as a criminal who violated diplomatic neutrality. You do not have to do this, Yuri said quietly. There are other ways to seek justice for your parents. Are there? Kira asked. General Cho wants to use my testimony to justify war. The hegemony wants me silenced forever. Everyone wants to use me for their own purposes. This is the first time anyone has asked what I want. And what do you want? Kira touched the small pendant around her neck, the only thing she had left from her mother. I want my parents' deaths to mean something. I want other families not to lose their children to preventable accidents. And I want to believe that even the worst people can choose to do better if someone gives them the chance. Admiral Sun Jayun approached them, her uniform crisp and her expression serious. She was Daeho's superior, sent from Earth Command to oversee the negotiations. Unlike General Cho, she believed in diplomacy over military action, but she was taking a huge risk by allowing this meeting. Miss Velnathi, she said formally, the hegemony delegation has arrived. Are you ready? Kira nodded. Yes, ma'am. Remember, you are not on trial here. You are simply telling your story. Let them make their own choices about how to respond. They walked through the station's corridors toward the main conference room. Harmony Point was beautiful, decorated with art and plants from hundreds of different worlds. But Kira barely noticed the scenery. Her mind was focused on what lay ahead. The conference room was large and circular, with seats arranged so that no one side had advantage over another. Windows looked out on the stars, reminding everyone present that their decisions would affect worlds beyond counting. Daeho was already there, reviewing his notes one final time. He looked up when Kira entered and gave her an encouraging smile. Over the past weeks, she had come to think of him as something like an uncle, someone who protected her not because he had to, but because he chose to. The hegemony delegation entered with military precision, 6 figures in dark robes, their faces hidden behind ceremonial masks that represented different aspects of their culture. At their head walked Overlord Vex Nethys, the most powerful diplomat in hegemony space. He was tall even by hegemony standards, his skin pale blue-gray, his eyes black as the space between stars. Kira had seen pictures of him before, but being in the same room was different. This was the man who commanded fleets capable of destroying planets. This was the voice that spoke for a government that controlled hundreds of star systems and trillions of beings. Overlord Nethys took his seat without looking at anyone else in the room. His presence seemed to fill the space around him with cold authority. We are here, he said in perfect standard galactic, because humans have made serious accusations against the hegemony. We expect these accusations to be proven or withdrawn immediately. Admiral Yoon stood to respond, but Kira was already getting to her feet. Overlord Nethys, she said in fluent hegemony high speech, the formal language used only by the highest levels of their government. Every hegemony delegate turned to stare at her in shock. Very few non-hegemony beings ever learned their ceremonial tongue. For a human refugee to speak it perfectly was almost unthinkable. I am Kira Velnathi, daughter of Junho Velnathi and Mai Velnathi, miners who died serving your empire's interests on Kepler 442b 2 years ago. Overlord Nethys studied her with new interest. You speak our high tongue well for a street orphan. I learned it by listening to your people's broadcasts, Kira replied. Altarians have good memories for languages. And what do you remember about your parents' deaths? Kira had practiced this moment in her mind hundreds of times, but facing the actual overlord was harder than she had imagined. His black eyes seemed to look straight through her as if he could see every thought and fear. I remember my father coming home 3 days before he died, she began. He was upset because he had found safety reports showing that Tunnel 7 was dangerous. The support beams were cracked. The air recycling system was failing. 17 people worked in that tunnel, including my parents. Mining is dangerous work, Overlord Nethys said dismissively. Accidents happen. This was not an accident. Kira's voice stayed steady despite the fear in her chest. My father reported the safety problems to his supervisor, Marcus Webb. Mr. Webb told him to keep working anyway. He said the insurance would cover any problems and that quotas were more important than repairs. You have no proof of this conversation. I have my memory. My father recorded the conversation on his personal device. He played it for my mother that night because he was thinking about reporting it to the Colonial Mining Authority. Where is this recording now? Destroyed, Kira said. When Titan Mining Corporation demolished our housing complex after the accident. They said it was for safety reasons, but they destroyed everything. Documents, personal belongings, evidence, everything except what I carry in my memory. Overlord Nethys was quiet for a moment. Even if this conversation happened as you describe, it proves nothing. One supervisor making poor decisions does not represent official hegemony policy. Kira nodded. You are right. One conversation proves very little. But I remember other conversations too. She began to speak, and her voice took on the rhythm of a storyteller. This was something she had learned from her mother, who used to sing stories about their family history. The trick was not to accuse or argue, but simply to paint pictures with words and let listeners see what she had seen. I remember my father talking with other miners in our kitchen. They were worried because safety inspections had been canceled for 6 months. The inspectors cost too much money, someone had decided. The miners could inspect their own equipment. She spoke about conversations between supervisors, overheard through thin walls, about pressure from corporate headquarters to increase production regardless of safety costs, about workers who had died in accidents on other mining stations, always just before they were scheduled to testify about dangerous conditions. I remember my mother crying after the memorial service for the Kepler 338 miners. 43 people died when their station's life support failed. She said it was just like what happened to her brother on Titan 7 and her cousin on New Mars. Always the same pattern, always preventable accidents that nobody prevented. As she spoke, Kira watched Overlord Nethys's face. His expression never changed, but she noticed that his hands were clenched tightly in his lap. The other delegates were shifting uncomfortably in their seats. These are serious accusations, Overlord Nethys said when she finished. But they are still just memories. Stories told by miners who may have misunderstood corporate policies. Yes, Kira agreed. They are just memories, but they are true memories. Altarians cannot lie effectively about things we have witnessed. Our brain structure makes deception almost impossible. And what do you want us to do with these memories? This was the moment Kira had been preparing for. Not to demand justice, not to threaten war, but to offer something nobody expected. I want you to investigate, she said simply. I want you to look at your own records. Review the safety reports from Kepler 442b and the other mining stations where these accidents happened. Talk to the survivors. Check the communications between corporate headquarters and local supervisors. Why should we investigate ourselves? Because, Kira said, if these accidents were really preventable, then good people in your government were lied to. Someone made decisions that killed innocent workers and made the hegemony look like monsters who do not care about life. Those people betrayed your trust and damaged your honor. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. My parents were good people who worked hard and followed orders. They believed in the mining company they served. They thought their supervisors cared about their safety. They died because someone decided that profits were more important than lives. But I do not think that decision came from you, Overlord Nethys. I think it came from people who counted on you never finding out what they had done. The room was completely silent. Even Admiral Yoon looked surprised by Kira's approach. Instead of accusing the hegemony leadership of murder, she was suggesting that they too had been betrayed by corrupt subordinates. 6 months later, Kira stood on the platform at New Seoul Spaceport watching the morning shuttles arrive. The same place where she had once searched through garbage for food was now decorated with banners in dozens of languages. Representatives from 17 different species were arriving for the most important ceremony in recent galactic history. She wore formal diplomatic robes now, deep blue with silver trim that matched the official colors of the Interspecies Cultural Institute. The clothes were beautiful, but she still felt strange wearing them. 6 months ago, she had been a street refugee with infected wounds and no future. Today, she was a cultural ambassador helping to create a new form of interstellar relations. Nervous? Yuri asked, approaching with a tablet full of schedules and protocols. Always, Kira admitted. But good nervous. The kind that means something important is about to happen. Yuri had become more than just a translator. She was now the director of cultural documentation, recording the stories and traditions of refugee populations across human space. Her work with Kira had shown how much could be learned when people took time to really listen to each other. The hegemony delegation just arrived, Yuri reported. Overlord Nethys himself is leading it, Kira nodded. She had been expecting this. The past 6 months had been full of surprises, but perhaps none greater than what Overlord Nethys had chosen to do after their meeting on Harmony Point. 2 weeks after that confrontation, shocking news had spread across the galaxy. The hegemony had announced the arrest of 47 corporate executives and government officials in connection with mining safety violations. Titan Mining Corporation had been dissolved, its assets seized to compensate families of workers killed in preventable accidents. But that was just the beginning. Overlord Nethys had done something unprecedented in hegemony history. He had invited outside observers to review their industrial safety practices. He had opened previously classified files about mining operations. He had personally met with families of workers who had died, offering not just compensation, but genuine apologies for the failures that had cost their loved ones' lives. Most shocking of all, he had proposed something that no one in the galaxy had thought possible: the first interspecies cultural exchange program. Traditional diplomacy, he had announced, focuses on trade agreements and military treaties. But we have learned that many conflicts arise from misunderstanding and fear. Perhaps it is time to try a different approach. The program was revolutionary. Instead of meeting only in formal negotiations, representatives from different species would live together, learn each other's languages and customs, and build personal relationships that could prevent wars before they started. Kira had been offered the position of the program's first cultural ambassador. After everything she had been through, some people expected her to refuse any connection to the hegemony. But she had surprised them by accepting immediately. My parents taught me to judge people by their actions, not their origins, she had explained. Overlord Nethys could have ignored my testimony or silenced me quietly. Instead, he chose to investigate, to punish the guilty, and to try to build something better. That deserves recognition. Now, as the opening ceremony approached, Kira thought about how much had changed. The spaceport district still bustled with activity, but new buildings had been constructed. The Interspecies Cultural Institute occupied a beautiful complex with gardens, libraries, and residential areas designed to accommodate beings from dozens of different worlds. Deho approached, wearing his formal ambassador's uniform. His role had changed too. Instead of trying to prevent wars through military deterrence, he now worked to prevent wars through cultural understanding. His success with Kira's case had made him the logical choice to head the human participation in the exchange program. "Are you ready for your speech?" he asked. "I think so," Kira replied, "though I still cannot believe they want me to speak in front of the entire Galactic Assembly." "You changed the course of interstellar history," Deho said. "Your words deserve to be heard." The ceremony hall was magnificent. Representatives from 17 species sat in sections designed for their specific needs. The Centaurians had gravitational adjustment platforms. The water-breathing Aquarians had sealed environmental suits. The crystalline silicates had light-filtering shields to protect their mineral structures. At the center of the hall, a simple podium waited. This was where Kira would address the largest gathering of interstellar leaders in recorded history. President Minsu Jiang of the Colonial Alliance spoke first, welcoming the delegates and explaining the importance of the new cultural exchange program. General Cho, who had once wanted to use Kira's testimony as a weapon for war, now praised the diplomatic solutions that had prevented conflict. Admiral Yoon introduced the various cultural institutes that were being established on worlds throughout human space. Each would focus on different aspects of interspecies understanding: language learning, artistic exchange, scientific cooperation, and conflict resolution. Finally, it was time for the main address. Master Jin Woo Seo, the Institute's director, approached the podium. 6 months ago, he began, a 16-year-old refugee returned a lost wallet to a human diplomat. It was a simple act of honesty, the kind that happens thousands of times every day across the galaxy. No one expected it to change anything. He gestured toward Kira, who stood and walked to the podium. The hall fell silent as she looked out at the assembled delegates. Somewhere in the crowd, she could see Overlord Nethys watching her with his unreadable black eyes. "My name is Kira Velnathi," she began in Standard Galactic, then repeated the words in Hegemony High Speech, Centaurian Trade Tongue, and 5 other languages. "I am the daughter of Junho and Mai Velnathi, miners who died in an accident that should not have happened." She paused, looking around the hall at faces representing dozens of species and hundreds of worlds. 6 months ago, I was living on the streets of New Seoul, hungry and sick and forgotten. I survived by staying invisible, by avoiding attention, by never trusting anyone enough to hope for better. When I found Ambassador Kim's wallet, every instinct told me to take what was inside and use it to escape to another world. But my parents had taught me that honor is not about what you can get away with. It is about what you choose to do when no one is watching. So I returned the wallet even though I needed those credits desperately. I thought that would be the end of it. One small act of honesty in a galaxy that rarely notices such things. But Ambassador Kim surprised me by caring about why I had made that choice. Dr. Park surprised me by treating my infections without asking for payment. Yuri Han surprised me by fighting for my legal rights when I did not even know I had any. Most of all, Overlord Nethys surprised me by choosing to investigate the truth about my parents' deaths instead of simply silencing the witness who could cause problems. She looked directly at the Hegemony delegation. When I first met Overlord Nethys, I was terrified. He represented everything I had been taught to fear about the Hegemony, but he taught me something important. People can change. Organizations can choose to do better. Even the most powerful leaders can admit mistakes and work to fix them. The cultural exchange program exists because different species chose to surprise each other. Humans chose to offer protection instead of exploitation. The Hegemony chose investigation over cover-up. 17 different governments chose cooperation over competition. But the most important choice was made by individuals, not governments. Ambassador Kim chose to help a stranger who had helped him. Dr. Park chose to treat someone who could not pay. Yuri chose to fight for someone who had no power. Overlord Nethys chose truth over convenience. Every person in this hall has the power to make such choices. Every day, each of us decides whether to build bridges or walls, whether to offer trust or demand proof, whether to see strangers as threats or as potential friends. Kira's voice grew stronger as she continued. My parents died because some people chose profits over lives, but their deaths led to changes that will save other families from the same loss. 17 species are here today because we chose to believe that understanding each other is more important than fearing each other. The wallet I returned contained enough credits to change my life, but returning it led to changes that affected entire worlds. We never know which small act of kindness might grow into something extraordinary. She paused, thinking of her parents and the lessons they had taught her. Some people think that being strong means never showing weakness. Others think that being smart means never trusting anyone. But I have learned that real strength comes from choosing to be vulnerable enough to help others. Real wisdom comes from being brave enough to believe that people can be better than their worst moments. The cultural exchange program is not just about preventing wars, though it will do that. It is not just about improving trade, though it will do that too. It is about proving that the greatest strength in the galaxy is not military power or economic control. It is the simple human ability to look at a stranger and see someone worth protecting. The hall was completely silent. Kira could see delegates leaning forward, hanging on her words. The transport shuttle landed with a soft hiss on the concrete pad. Steam rose from its engines as they cooled in the evening air. Ambassador Dae-ho Kim stepped out slowly, his shoulders heavy with more than just the weight of his diplomatic bag. 3 weeks of failed talks had left deep lines on his face. The Hegemony representatives had refused every peace offer. War seemed closer than ever. The spaceport district of New Seoul bustled around him even at this late hour. Hovercars hummed past on the elevated lanes above. Neon signs in a dozen different languages advertised everything from alien food to starship repairs. This was the melting pot of human space, where refugees from across the galaxy came seeking new lives. Daeho pulled his coat tighter as he walked toward the waiting area. His driver would arrive soon. All he wanted was to reach his residence, pour a glass of real Earth whiskey, and try to figure out how to tell his superiors that diplomacy had failed again. He never saw the small figure watching him from behind a pile of shipping containers. Kira had been living in the shadows of the spaceport for 2 years now. At 16, she was small even for an Altarian. Her blue-scaled skin had lost its natural shine from poor nutrition. Her large amber eyes, once bright with curiosity, now held the wariness of someone who had learned that the universe was not kind to the helpless. She watched the human diplomat with interest. His clothes were expensive. His bag looked important. But it was not greed that made her pay attention. It was the way he walked. She had learned to read people during her time on the streets. This man carried sadness like a heavy stone in his chest. Daeho stopped at a food vendor to buy coffee. The bitter smell reminded him of home, of Earth, of better times. He set his diplomatic bag down for just a moment to reach for his wallet. The vendor, a friendly Centaurian with 4 arms, chatted about the weather while preparing the drink. When Daeho picked up his coffee and walked away, he forgot his bag. Kira saw it happen from 50 meters away. She also saw the 3 human street rats who had been watching the diplomat. They were older than her, meaner, and they had already started moving toward the abandoned bag. She knew what was in those diplomatic pouches. Important papers, credit chips, maybe even real money, enough to buy food for months. Enough to get off this planet and start somewhere new. But her father's voice echoed in her memory. Honor is not about what others do, little star. It is about what you choose to do when no one is watching. Kira ran. She was fast, faster than the street rats expected. Her small size let her slip through crowds while they had to push their way through. She reached the bag just as the largest of them stretched out his hand. Mine, he growled in broken standard. No, Kira said quietly. She had learned that sometimes the best way to handle bullies was to speak softly and be ready to run. It belongs to someone else. The street rat laughed. He left it. Finders keepers. He reached for the bag again. Kira grabbed it first. I saw who it belongs to. I will return it. You? The rat sneered. Little blue freak, you think that human cares about aliens like us? He probably has insurance. He will just buy new things. Kira held the bag tighter. Her father had been a miner, an honest man who worked hard for little pay. Her mother had sung songs about heroes who chose to do right even when it was difficult. Both were dead now, killed in a mining accident that could have been prevented, but their lessons lived on in their daughter. Maybe, she said, but it is still his. The street rat started forward, but his friends grabbed his arms. Not worth it, one muttered. Security drones are watching. They disappeared into the crowd, still cursing. Kira clutched the bag and looked around. Where had the diplomat gone? She found him 20 minutes later, standing beside a sleek hover car and speaking rapidly into a communication device. His driver, a professional-looking woman in a dark uniform, was searching through the car's interior. I am certain I had it when I left the shuttle, Daeho was saying. Check the vendor area again. Kira approached slowly. Humans made her nervous. Most ignored aliens like her. Some were cruel. A few were kind, but even kindness from humans often came with a price. Excuse me, she said in careful Korean. She had learned the language by listening to broadcasts. Her pronunciation was not perfect, but it was understandable. Daeho turned, surprised. He saw a young Altarian girl, thin and dirty, holding his diplomatic bag. His first thought was that she had stolen it. His second thought, looking at her amber eyes, was that she seemed more frightened than threatening. That is mine, he said, not unkindly, but not warmly either. Yes, Kira nodded. You left it at the coffee place. I brought it back. Daeho studied her face. Altarians were known for their inability to lie effectively. Their facial scales changed color slightly when they were being dishonest. This girl's scales showed no such change. He took the bag and opened it. Everything was there. His documents, his credit chips, even the small photo of his family that he carried for luck. Nothing missing, why? He asked. Kira tilted her head, not understanding. Why did you return it? Deho clarified. You could have kept it. Sold what was inside. Those credits would have been worth a lot to someone like you. The words stung, but Kira understood why he said them. Someone like her. A street alien. A refugee with no home and no family. Someone the universe had forgotten. My father taught me, she said simply. He said honor is not about what you can get away with. It is about what you choose to do when no one is watching. Deho felt something shift in his chest. After weeks of dealing with politicians and military leaders who schemed and lied for advantage, here was someone who returned a bag simply because it was the right thing to do. He reached into his wallet and pulled out several credit chips. Here, take these. As a reward. Kira looked at the credits. They would buy food for weeks, maybe even passage off-world. But she shook her head. I did not do it for reward, she said. I did it because it was right. She started to walk away, but Deho noticed something that made him call out. Wait. Kira stopped and turned back. Your arm, Deho said. You are hurt. Kira glanced down. Her sleeve had pulled back, revealing infected cuts on her forearm. She quickly covered them. It is nothing, she lied, and this time her scales did shift slightly. Deho stepped closer. He could see now that she was not just thin from hunger. She was sick. The infection was serious, and Altarians were vulnerable to bacterial diseases that humans could easily fight off. How long have you been on the streets? He asked. 2 years, Kira answered honestly, alone. My parents died. Mining accident on Kepler 442b. The company said it was nobody's fault, but she shrugged. I had no other family. No money for transport home to Altair Prime. So I stay here. Deho looked at this small girl who had shown more integrity in 5 minutes than most of the diplomats he dealt with showed in their entire careers. She was dying slowly on the streets, but she had still chosen to return his bag rather than sell it for medicine. What is your name? He asked. Kira Velnathi. Kira, he repeated. I am Ambassador Deho Kim, and I think I owe you more than just a reward. He turned to his driver. Change of plans. We have one more passenger. The driver raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She had worked for the ambassador long enough to trust his judgment, even when it seemed unusual. I cannot go with you, Kira said, backing away. I have done nothing wrong, but sometimes humans think, I think, Deho interrupted gently, that you need medical attention. And I think I need to understand how someone with your integrity ended up forgotten on these streets. He opened the hovercar door. Please let me help you the way you helped me. Kira stared at the open door. Every instinct told her to run. Adults had disappointed her too many times, but there was something in the diplomat's eyes that reminded her of her father. A kindness that seemed real. Slowly, carefully, she got into the car. As they lifted off into the night sky of New Seoul, neither of them could have imagined how this simple act of returning a lost wallet would change not just their lives, but the fate of entire worlds.